All right, how's everybody doing? Good? Thumbs up. So we're in the last stretch for those in 660. So hopefully the assignments are coming along and everything's going well with that. I know it's still in summer, so it's always a challenge when you're at the in the summer and trying to pull off a big paper, but that's just the way life works sometimes. So hopefully it's interesting. I've got some good questions from people about what their ideas have been and their approach, and it's been looking really good. So I'm looking forward to receiving those. So I chose to, considering you're at the end of the path for this course and others as well, 322. Some of you may be from 322, and there's other people who may not be in any course and just want to figure out what to do with your skills. So this is something I've done before, so some of you may have heard this one before, at least elements of it, but I thought it was important at the end to try and kind of put all this stuff in practical application. So, where can you actually use what you've been learning out there in the world and, and take it to market, basically. So that's what tonight is all about. All right, so hopefully there's no objections to that. Are we okay with that? I'm going to make it, I have some general stuff, but I'm going to make some things, I don't know, a little more specific to EM tools. So the idea tonight is to take a look at the market and EM tools and find your path. So maybe you're not in a position, you're in a position right now you're not crazy about, or you're in a position you love, but you want to kind of, figure out where you might be going next in your own kind of personal development in your career. So what I'm going to do tonight in this session is give you some of the things that I think are helpful that I have used over the last 20 years to kind of navigate this area of work. Fortunately, today, the navigation is a lot easier because there's more options and there's more resources available in this day and age than there were, say, 20 years ago. So there we go. So, I mean, we need to ask first, what are the problems out there? Like, you always want to position yourself as a problem solver. In fact, today I was in meetings all afternoon about this new project where we're trying to figure that out, both individually and as a team, dealing with forest fires and stuff like that. So there's several global problems right now. And there are some big things shifting how we're working. So COVID-19, for instance, is one of the big things right now that's changing our economy and changing the way we work, and what are the demands on the market for how we go about doing things. I know for sure, like the tourism economy in certain developing countries is just totally emaciated, and they have to rethink what they do. So what does it mean for sustainable development? Then this whole, and we talked about this last week, this post-COVID economy, and what are some things that will emerge as a result of that. But in a more self-serving way, what does it mean for you and for your development? So if you're starting out, like some of you may be at an earlier stage in your career, and you're trying to dictate, where you might go and navigate the ship, and what will you do? Like, say, with this course, what are you going to do with this stuff that we've been studying? Maybe you're in the energy sector or another sector that will result in you having a big change in your career, right? In some cases, I've had students before that have been in careers that have just gone, they've been eradicated because of just change in the sector, in the energy sector, like surveying and stuff like that. So how do you pivot? Like, what do you need to pivot? And you may be just doing fine, maybe you're just killing it in what you're doing, but you want to up your game and you want to use your knowledge that you've gained in your master's degree and in some of the courses to kind of take it a step further. So All of these questions that I am posing to you are really fundamentally based on what you are doing, what you want to do, and what are the resources that are available to you. So I always start with me, like today, for instance, it's like, well, what do I add to this situation? So it's one thing is to figure out what you want, like say, like specific to EM tools, what are the things that you really gravitated to in this course? What are the things that you really like? So tell me, like, has there been a specific set of tools that you find the most interesting out of everything? Anybody? I'll tell you mine. Mine is SEA, Strategic Environmental Assessment. For whatever reason, I really like it. I've always gravitated towards it. I tend to do most of my work in that area. What about you? Learned about EMS, okay? Environmental management system, super important, right? So, and obviously there's a big requirement for them out there in the world, in the market. So that's a good one, kind of latch onto. MONA, EIA, SEA, CEA, all related, different, right? Like they're all similar in nature as an environmental assessment. However, they're different in their outlook, their application, and then the tools. LCA, for specific things, and SCA. So I like LCA too. I've done LCAs obviously, and I think it's a neat tool, especially when you start to put economics to that. I think that's quite, for me, quite interesting. All right, so I mean, you're gonna figure out stuff that you like in the mix. So so you kind of determine like what you want to work on. I think it's important to select what you want to work on and then match it to what's out there. There's a lot of resources out there to figure out what you like, really, and generally speaking. There's the classic "What Color Is Your Parachute" book. There's a bunch of those ones out there. I won't go into that, but if you want to like, figure out what what you migrate to or you're best at, there's a lot of resources, and I would recommend reading them. That's a really important thing to read. There's also some good tactical books out there to improve how you do what you do. Like, I mean, the classic one is How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. That's like a 1940s book that I think everybody should read who is doing any kind of work whatsoever. But specifically, you kind of have to think about your particular value proposition, your skills, what you've picked up in this course and your other courses, and then how that fits into what you offer the market. And that's called your value proposition. Okay, that's what you propose, what the value that you can bring. And then you also have to think what's going on in the market, like what is happening out there. And this is where it gets kind of tricky because the market's turned upside down right now, right? In some cases because of COVID. But I want to give you some things to look at and to think about, particular to environmental employment and environmental management tools that are really useful for you to kind of navigate, okay? So the first one is thinking of who you might, like where you might want to apply these tools. So what types of organizations do you see yourself working for or applying these tools? What is your vision for that and how you want to go about doing it? So like, for instance, based on what you've said, say like Mona is interested in EIA, SEA, and CEA. So for EIA, if I were interested in EIAs, I would be looking for companies or organizations doing infrastructure projects or consulting companies working on them. Like if you really want to do EIAs, consulting companies like Golder or CH2M Hill or whomever, Stantec, they do EIAs, right? So they're one of the groups you might want to target. SEA, that's different. It's for policy plans and programs. And so for SEA, like typically companies don't often do SEAs, whereas government agencies, some NGOs, some international governmental organizations, they deal with more of the world of SEAs because they deal with policies, they deal with programs, and they deal with planning, okay? CEA is a tricky one because you may get elements of that in the private sector. It may be a requirement of certain projects, but then it also could be done in the context of a governmental or governance application. So that can be in a lot of different things. LCA, again, often the people or the organizations that are most interested in doing LCAs are in the private sector. So they'll be looking at doing LCAs for their products, maybe for the production process, if they're like looking at the life cycle of oil and gas or potash or minerals or whatever. So I mean, that's often what you see LCA has done for those kind of in the private sector context. Okay, so you have to think about that though, like think about what you're interested in, then who might want that and where might that go in terms of the application. And it's very clear for some of them. EIA is very clear, SEA is pretty clear, other ones, LCA is pretty clear, but eco-certification, usually private sector, but it may be public sector, those ones are a little less clear. But here's some good resources that I think are incredibly useful for getting a snapshot of what's going on in the market. Now, I've personally used these ones when I was early on in my career, because, you know, like if you think of environmental work, like even in EM tools, like, you know, what are some of the skills that you could bring to the table? You know what I mean? Are there scientific skills? Sure. You may be a biologist, right? But are there applications that require more kind of legal expertise? Like you may have a law degree, right? What if you're more interested in the communication side? What about business? What about finance? There's a lot of different kind of elements, engineering and technology. So there's a lot of different aspects and skills and kind of attributes that you need to be aware of in order to see what's going on in the market. So this group here is one that I would absolutely spend some significant time looking through the resources. Eco Canada. Okay, I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with Eco Canada. If you aren't, become familiar with them. For any work in Canada, they are a very good resource. And specifically, this is a report that will help you connect specific skills to specific areas of employment. That guide there, if you go to that, that will really kind of help you frame what it is you want to do. I'm just going to go to that myself just to take a look at it. Just one sec. So if you go to that report, oops, oh my gosh, that link's not found. Just a sec, I miscalculated, I didn't copy. Oh, I see what's wrong. Just one sec. I think the space in it allows it not to come through properly. Just one sec, I'm going to make sure that this, there we go. Yeah, there's a space in that. Sorry about that. I'm going to send this through again. Here, it's the space there. There, if you try that one, that's without the space. So if you take a look at this, now, I mean, I know that we see a lot of this stuff coming from the government, blah, 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 but I'm telling you, this is very useful. So if you go and look through this choosing your path, this gives you an idea of the kind of the lay of the land. What I like here is in page number 5. This is, they've had this, established this for 20 years. They've had this framework, and it's very, very helpful. So this will help you look at where you might want to position yourself. So like there's A, B, and C, environmental protection, resource management, and resource sustainability. And environmental management really falls within the middle of all that stuff. So all of the tools are applicable in all of those sectors. However, you know, getting the job, like we're targeting who you want to work for, where you want to approach, this is where this is helpful, because you may say, look, I've got a lot of experience with water quality and air quality, right? Maybe you've been permitting or whatever. Then you can target those sector A's and groups within their framework, you know, where in their database, who would be good companies and types of employers that would be the types that you want to approach and narrow down. And they even have on their website like actual job postings and stuff like that. So I would spend some time with this. This will help you kind of figure out where it is you might want to navigate, particularly in Canada. And when I first left university, or at least left my undergrad, I really didn't know specifically where I wanted to go, and ended up in a really bizarre place. Because for me, I'll tell you, I looked at all of this stuff, and I didn't want to do water quality. I didn't want to do field sampling and all that kind of stuff. I was really interested, and a lot of my experience, because I've done a lot of multimedia, was in Sector C, resource sustainability, mostly in communications, public awareness, education, training, and sustainability, and R&D. That one, that's where I really found myself most interested. And I ended up then saying, okay, well, I gotta focus on that area. And I really looked for stuff that fit in that area, those kind of skills, and ended up being a producer and director of museums and science centers and world expos that dealt with environmental content. And I wouldn't have made that kind of finding or that decision and land in that job, actually, were it not for this framework to give me some kind of a little bit of a guidance as to where I was strongest and then where the market was. So spend some time with that. It's going to help you craft your value proposition, because you're going to like have a bunch of stuff that you're good at and projects that you've done, and this report that you've done for 6060, that's a part of your skills and knowledge. So I would recommend like looking at that, looking at what you've done, and then help craft your value proposition based on that. So what it is that you're really good at, like say for instance, if it's LCA, you will have done a micro LCA. You'll have developed an LCA implementation framework, if that's what you chose for this course. That's part of your value proposition if you're trying to kind of chase more of those opportunities. One thing I would recommend for you when you're doing this is to create a portfolio, a professional portfolio. So I have worked with a lot of designers in the past, like graphic designers, industrial designers, architects, whatever. And one thing that they always have a portfolio, because it's all kind of project-based visual work. I also think it's a good idea for like just professionals to do a portfolio as well. Why? Because it forces you to really kind of summarize and think about all the stuff that you have done that could potentially, that you're proud of, that you've done a good job of, and that you could showcase to someone to say, look, I really want to, whatever, work on biodiversity planning at the governmental level. And this is the stuff that I have done that demonstrates my capability to do that for you. Like if you're talking to the potential, client / employer. So the portfolio, and you can make it visual or whatever. I mean, I'd recommend making it visual as well. Have some images and then a description or whatever. That is huge, and I do that all the time for our work as a company. And we have to propose a portfolio all the time for bids and so forth. But it's no different for an individual. So I'd also look at, so you get that, you have an understanding of what the landscape looks like. You look at what you like to do and what, where you want to kind of go, and create your portfolio. But I would then look at, once you have that established, kind of the landscape, then look at the changing dynamics of the market. So the macro view, I like to call it. And I tend to focus on specific industries in different geographic areas. That's how I do it. So in terms of business development, which is not dissimilar to this, like you are a business in a way, you know what I mean? Like you're taking your skills to the market and trying to, apply them. So you're like selling what you do. So what I do with a company is we look at geographic regions and then sectors or areas of work, and then and try and better understand what the trends are in those areas. So for example, like energy, like who here is in the energy sector? Let me know. Thumbs up if you work in the energy sector. I mean energy as in oil and gas. Anybody? No one works in oil and gas. I find that hard to believe. Okay. if you worked in oil and gas, then hypothetically speaking, what you want to look at then in that sector. So, I mean, let's choose another one. Maybe you're working in agriculture, right? You want to look at the trends. So what is happening? Like in the case of energy, what is the trend that's happening in the energy sector in Canada? What are some trends from what we've been looking at? One of the big ones. Exactly. And broadly speaking, it's not just shifting to renewables, it's decarbonization. That's the general trend. There's yeah. Well, I mean, yeah. I mean, but carbon is an issue, right? Even if you're going back to coal, um, it doesn't matter. Like, it's still understanding the carbon aspect of the energy sector is going to be something that's there for sure. So look at the trends, policies, whether it's going back or going forward. Like for me, like in the, that I don't want to bring up. Yeah, well, we would assume that, but you know, fair enough for staying that. I've been looking at Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates for new work for what we're doing, and the trend there is absolutely renewables and carbon management, carbon capture and storage, integrated energy systems that can work together with desalination, renewables, solar, some geothermal, that. Now I've decided to do that based on, you know, just going to conferences and meeting people and, you know, getting good partners on the ground and stuff. But I really, you know, for me, I want to know exactly where things, what people are thinking there. Food security, huge issue there. So there's that. So you want to look at those trends. And this is going to absolutely play a role in how you take the EM tools knowledge that you have to market. So what's one of the trends in environmental performance reporting? What's one of the trends? What's one thing that people are using more and more that we've looked at? GRI, exactly. The GRI is so much more widely used today than it was 10 years ago. It's quite astonishing. So that's one of the things you want to look at, and a big part of the GRI is stakeholder engagement, indicators, metrics, keep KPIs, basically benchmarking sustainability. So you want to look at those kind of trends, look at tech trends. So what are the new things coming online in terms of tech? Like today, what we are talking about is like looking at the role of sensing and data management and so forth in fires, wildfires and so forth. And you want to look at that. So environmental performance data, all of these things are critical. And the one thing that you've seen in looking at the GRI reports is they're heavily based on indicators and data that supports those indicators. So you got to look at that stuff. I'd look at it geographically, and then I'd also look at the specific sectors that you're interested in. Okay, and now if you are an entrepreneur, or even if you're working for a company, let's say you're in your position now and you're looking at foreign markets, like where do you guys want to apply what you're doing, you've got a new tech or whatever, then that's a whole different thing. Then you really want to take advantage, at least in Canada, of the Trade Commission service. I use these folks. They are very helpful. So I'm not sure how useful this will be for you, but I'm going to include some information on it just because it's that important. Okay, I'm going to send this through. So these folks, if you are working for a Canadian company, or even if you are, you know, whatever, an individual, it's helpful. So these folks, I have been helped tremendously by these folks because what they do, they have a trade commissioner team in every country in the world, Canadians working on behalf of Canada, Canadian companies, to help them understand what's going on in these markets, do intros and stuff. And what's really useful from them is their insights on the ground. They usually are, sometimes they are Canadians that have been, assigned to whatever, Nicaragua or what have you. But often what they will do is they'll hire local people to serve as sector specialists. So like energy or renewables or whatever, they'll have someone in that office who knows everything that's going on in that country with respect to that particular application. Could be food services, could be on the environmental side, it could be technology, it could be services, consulting, or whatever. But those folks are really, 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 really helpful. Okay, so that's it. So there you go. You have kind of you've got an idea of some of what your value proposition is with the portfolio. If you want to focus out on certain EM tools or your knowledge of EM tools, go for it. You look at the market itself, take a macro view, look at different trends in environmental management in sectors and geographically. But once you have a good handle on what you want to do and how you can act on certain things, like what is your value proposition of doing LCAs? Okay, well, you've got an example of your assignment or whatever you've done to show people to look at what you have accomplished. How do you go to market? Like what's your approach? And this is going to depend based on who you're working for or who you're proposing to help solve problems. Ultimately, it's about solving problems. So if you are an individual, like if it's just you, or if you're in a company, or you're an NGO, like whatever it is that you are representing, maybe it's just you have your own value proposition, you know where you want to go, you have your portfolio, and at that stage, you have to go out there and go hunting. Map out the types of orgs you want to work with, make a network map. You can, I would recommend, and this is good, this is a very healthy thing to do, is to do informational interviews, right? So if you are planning on, I don't know, like say if you're really interested in LCA, and you've noticed some groups that are potentially doing that or you think could benefit from it, don't be shy. Like find out who the head of environment is or whomever, like the person that you really want to talk to. Reach out to them and say, you want to do an informational interview. I have done this several times. Now, the idea here is make it as if you want to learn about what they're doing and explain to them, look, I've been working in this area, I've got 10 years experience, I'm really wanting to get more into LCA and apply it. I've noticed that you've done a bit of that stuff, or potentially you have some products that I think could benefit from it. I'd really like to learn more about what you guys do. I'm wondering if you could spare, 15 minutes to have a quick call or a sit down, and so I could just learn more about what you do. And just be honest and upfront. And like 9 times out of 10, someone will grant you the time. I've had CEOs, very busy people, grant me that time because I explained to them the situation, and they they're happy to help. Usually, people most often are, if you're polite and you approach it the right way, they're happy to help you. And what you do then is you obviously present yourself well and so forth, but go there and listen. Take your questions, take notes, ask questions, and listen, listen, listen. Learn and just reflect. And this is going to help you like figure out how you can apply what you've been working on to their situation, right? And this applies not as only as an individual, as an organization. It's going to allow you to get a feel for what is out there and then how you might fit with it. You know what I mean? Like you may not really understand how you can fit with what's going on in that sector or with those companies. By doing this, you will gain a much better understanding quickly of how you fit in. And also it's a good way to get to know people, right? If you take this approach in your plight, I mean, no one's going to give you a hard time, and you will just have another contact, right? Now, if you're an organization, it's a little bit different, but the same principles apply. You want to go and look out there. You want to kind of see what's going on. You want to try and find where the pain points are out there. Now, I've started a company from nothing and then kind of built into, you know, what we're doing today. And a lot of it has to do with perception and building a brand, and what's perceived as the value that you bring. And you know, there's a ton of stuff happening in the environmental space right now, and this is a perfect time for new solutions. You know, and innovation is a huge part of that. So I'm going to put through this link. This is something I did for a client group that's worked with me out in Montreal. I call it the Manifesto for Going Global. But this is kind of a step-by-step breakdown of that process I talked about before for a company to go and attack the global market. Like, that's what it is designed for. Just a sec, I think that space didn't come through. Hopefully that works. Does that? Oh, there we go. That should work. I was missing a space in that one. Just let me see if that, does that work when you go and download it? Should do. I think it was just a space. Yes. So that's a bit old now. But I think the same things apply. Okay. So what are some things going on that I think are, you know, how do you act on this? What we can expect, how you should move forward. I would start to kind of have a vision, like start to kind of create that vision for what you want to do. It's very important to kind of, you know, get that established in your mind where you want to go. The other thing is to try and establish the pain point. You want to look at where there's pain, where there are problems. Like, for instance, oil and gas, there's a lot of pain right now in the environmental space. They need solutions. SMEs, they're actually usually lacking in this kind of expertise, and so there's they need help, right? And you know, I think what we're going to start to see now with COVID is a lot more digital, a lot more virtualization of the work, as we discussed last week. And there's a lot of pain right now in terms of those SMEs and because of the impact of the pandemic. But going forward, you're going to see a lot more creative partnering. You're going to see a lot more contract work, I expect. Therefore, you're going to have to be a little more adaptable than before. There's going to be a need to assess risks. So, like, you know, a pandemic obviously is a big one. Climate change. This is something that I don't think we really kind of have a handle on it. So, for instance, did anybody watch the Conservative Party's leadership campaign? Did anybody watch that? Like the vote? Did anybody see that? So Aaron O'Toole won. There's one thing that was quite surprising about that was missing from his victory speech. The machines won, yeah. What was missing from his victory speech? I guess not many people saw it. There we go. Climate change action. It was totally vacant. Now, why do you think it was not there? kind of not really on brand, exactly. Like, so in a way, just the way he and they, I mean, I think McKay maybe less so. McKay is a little more kind of progressive about that stuff, but what he did was he tried to appeal to the broad tent. They call it the big blue tent. And within that tent is a fairly significant um, group of folks that doesn't want to hear about that, right? Some really don't want to hear about it, and a lot of people kind of don't want to hear about it. And then there's a good chunk of people that want to hear about it, but on practical terms, like how do we deal with this? And then there's a portion of it that are passionate about it, and just happen to be, conservatives as opposed to liberals. But it's a little off, kind of, as Peter said, a bit off brand. That's not to say, though, that it's not going to be a necessity, because it's not going to go away. So mitigation and adaptation are areas that I would highly recommend looking at how you can take your EM tools knowledge, and we've looked at this directly with some of the EM tools, and what is their role in climate change mitigation adaptation. Communications is going to be a big part of that. Capacity development and HR training is a big part of that. People need to get up to speed with that. Compromise. So like they're going to have to compromise. So let's say the conservatives get in, or compromise is going to be their approach, which is how do we develop the energy sector while at the same time being environmentally responsive? Like how do you compromise? What are the things, what are the trade-offs that you make? So in order to compromise, you have to articulate trade-offs. In order to articulate trade-offs, you have to have disciplinary knowledge of this field, to know what those trade-offs are. So look at it as compromise as being an opportunity, knowing how to compromise and helping people compromise. That's a big part of this. Reconciliation, that's another one out there. Now, this has been a big push on the part of the Liberal government, but at the same time, we haven't really figured it out, as has been demonstrated by some of the issues that we've been raising with, pipelines and so forth. So reconciliation, how do we go about doing that? Different, and from an environmental standpoint, how do we reconcile different worldviews and different ways of doing environmental assessments? That's a part of it. So it's, in a sense, the demand and the push for reconciliation is a big opportunity. New tech, everything coming online with IoT, big data, renewable energies, all that kind of stuff. Another area I think which is interesting is social entrepreneurship. So this is kind of areas in which you have non-traditional partners working together. There are some business experts that call this space the plural space, the plural economy. And I wouldn't ignore this either. So for those of you that are really passionate about issues and so forth, a lot of those opportunities for EM analysis and EM tools are in the non-traditional space. Like not working for an not working for a private sector company, not working for a government, but maybe working for a cooperative or working for a non-governmental organization. And there's more and more opportunities in that space as well. So think about non-traditional organizations operating in this space, because usually those groups are usually purpose-driven, right? So say if you're going to work for the IISD, the International Institute for Sustainable Development, the WRI, the Pembina Institute, whatever. There's a lot of them out there, and you'll notice that there are different groups that could greatly benefit. Usually they don't have very good expertise of environmental management tools. So that plural is an interesting one, and it's people aren't used to it, but I would take a really critical look at that to see how you might fit in that. And lastly, that's the key, is to find out how you fit with that. So how does your skills and knowledge now in LCA or environmental assessment, how can you take that and fit that with what's going on, with who, how, and so forth. Now, this is not an obvious process. I'm not saying it's easy. It's not that easy. If you really want to kind of find out or work on stuff you want to work on, it does take a bit of work. It will require work to get work. But I can tell you that if you're a creative and you're persistent with it, the work and opportunities will come. I guarantee you that. You have to be persistent, you have to be focused, you have to be a little creative and a little agile and adapt. But if you are, it will come. There's so much stuff going on right now. Say if you wanted to work in finance and EM tools, that's not obvious. But if you take this approach and kind of like, you know, focus on whatever sector and whatever area you want to work on, start to talk to people in that field, you're going to find some opportunities and find a good fit for what you want to do and way to apply what we've been working on. All right. So, and the last step is to just go and get it and get it done. Now, speaking from personal experience, when I first started in Vancouver, like whatever 20 years ago, um, it didn't come that, like, it wasn't obvious. It took a good 2 months for me to really land in something that I felt was what I wanted to do. And then today, you know, when I'm looking at new stuff, like new regions in the Middle East, for instance, the Middle East has taken like, I don't know, I mean, I've worked in there before. Like I was there almost 18 years ago working on projects, whereas now it's a new game and so forth. I started in December going over there, conference, meeting folks, another conference, further follow up, and so forth. So, I mean, it's whatever, December, we're almost in September, you know, so that's like 9 months. And, you know, there's been some things happen, but nothing like huge. Point being, be patient. It will take time for some of these things. Some will come faster, but especially the international stuff, it does take time. So be patient and find those kind of like small victories. But I do recommend kind of being systematic and focused and kind of finding out what your value proposition is, doing a portfolio, being able to articulate that, and really focusing it. People are busy. They want to know exactly why you are talking to them and what you can help them out with. And if you have that quickly, like on hand, you know, that's going to give you a huge advantage, right? So there we go. That's my kind of spiel for tonight. I'm pushing 50 minutes. Questions? What are your questions? Which is the most promising sector to make a difference in biodiversity loss? Ah, good question. Excellent question. All right. You know what my answer is? Neither of those. Neither. What is the answer? Anybody? It's not those two. Who is it? Yes, private sector. If you really want to make a big difference on the loss of biodiversity, the groups that have the least understanding of that and where the most work is required are with the groups that are having the greatest impact. And those are the private sector companies. Now, that's not to say that there isn't a role for not-for-profits or government. Obviously, there is in terms of regulation and monitoring and so forth, and not-for-profit as well in terms of awareness raising, some research. But really, like the real kind of the big elephant in the room on that is with the private sector. And I believe that it is an untapped area. It's just getting going. We're just starting to see some good examples. And the market isn't even demanding it. Like say, for instance, the climate change, the pressure on companies for climate change is now there, right? There's banks, there's taxation coming on. Banks are, you know, and some stock markets aren't allowing carbon intensive industries to get financed through them. So there's like some real kind of pressure building in that area, climate change for private sector, whereas biodiversity is not there yet. So that's why I think it's amazing, because it's going to happen. If you look at the planetary boundaries model framework, biodiversity and ecosystem are the area that is in the most, it's the most problematic right now. It's that's where the red lights or sirens are blaring. Therefore, you know, there's going to have to be more attention paid to the biodiversity and ecosystem services. So now we have IPBES, now we have TEEB, now we have these kind of foundational frameworks that are going to help inform that work, much like carbon was 10, 15 years ago. We just started to get protocols for greenhouse gas inventories in the early 2000s. You know, it took some time to the CCC and the IPCC, those are the kind of the authorities on the science as well as the policy for climate change. You know, they were, you know, UNFCCC started in 93, right? So that's an area I'd say private sector or not for, it just depends on what you find, but I would not count out private sector. I really keep my eyes on that. And then if you think about it, what are some things that can be helpful tools wise? Well, environmental impact assessment for sure, biodiversity focused, life cycle assessment, biodiversity focused life cycle assessment, sure. SCA possibly and company, but more likely LCA and EMS, environmental management systems, bringing biodiversity factors into environmental management systems for companies. That's important. That's a big area. So for continuous monitoring of their impacts. So that's what I would say is that's the hot area is private sector. Any other questions? And tech, so the data. So you're interested in the data side of things, lots of interesting things happening on the data side, sensing and so forth. That's stuff I was working on today. But those are some ideas. I mean, of course, going forward, if you have any questions, you have my email address. Feel free to reach out. I think what you have got in terms of the meat of this course will help you understand where things fit tools-wise. And then also what I tried to do is to give you also a bit of a theoretical basis. So that's why we have the literature that was chosen. So that's not just about tools, but there's kind of underlying strategic concepts and so forth, you know, that will help kind of bring you the critical analysis to allow you to propose solutions for certain situations. All right, that's it for me. Unless you have any questions, we will sign up for tonight. 660 tutorial tomorrow if you want. I don't know if there's anything specifically that you want to work on, or if you have questions. If you do, let me know now. And if you just want to have some time to discuss paper or whatever, that's cool. And if it's okay, if we're all under control, then we don't need to do it. So let me know if you want to do that tomorrow. Is there any specific topic you'd like covered? All right. I'll send an email out, and if I get responses, then we will do it tomorrow. I will leave it open so that if you just want to have questions that you want to discuss about the end of the course, that's fine. We'll just keep it fluid. All right, so hopefully this is helpful. The notes are going to be posted. So I got a little behind in the podcast, but those will all be going up. ES valuation, LC for business. Oh my gosh. So of course, the hardest topic that we could possibly do. I can do that. If you want to do that tomorrow, I can go through that. Like economic valuation or just the ecosystem services and how that can link to LCA. I prefer to just do ecosystem services in an LCA. Keep it like manageable. All right, we'll do that. I'll show some examples. All right, thank you for coming out. And this is recorded, so those that couldn't get it will be posted. All of them will be posted tomorrow. All right, take care. Stay safe. Definitely stay safe. No big Latin dance parties and stuff like that they're doing in Montreal right now. Just saw that on the news. No big parties. It's kind of, let's make sure we don't spread the virus all over the place. Yes, they will continue to be. I'll let you know about them.